All right. Welcome to Car Buying Strategies for Students. We are Sandia area. My name is Jamie Jaramillo. I'm the Community Development Manager. I have here with me Zoe. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Zoe.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe. I'm the Lending Center Consultant Supervisor here at Sandia area, and I'm very happy that you guys are here. Today we're going to be sharing some awesome strategies when it comes to first-time auto buying.
We're excited that you guys have joined us today. We want to encourage everyone to participate openly during the discussion. So whether you're joining us in person at the Career Center or if you're joining us on the webinar itself, please feel free to unmute yourself and interject, ask questions along the way. We'll talk a little bit about take-home activity, and then we will follow up the webinar with an email that will have a recording of this webinar and a few take-homes and the presentation as well if there are any questions. But without further ado, Zoe's going to go ahead and kick us off.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie. Alrighty, everyone. Perfect. So today we're going to be talking about some car buying strategies for students or first-time auto buying. So what's are a couple of things we're going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about some steps you can take before you buying, sort of some things you consider before you sort of make that big purchase. Credit scores, what are they? What is a credit report? Figuring out what you can afford, what things you should consider in addition to your auto payment. Choosing between a used, new, or a leased vehicle. Some tips for negotiating, financing options for students or any young adult, and understanding car insurance costs and savings. And if you see me look up here, up to the sky, I'm looking at the presentation, so don't think that I'm looking away, but please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions or anything like that. I'm more than happy to take the time and we can definitely discuss it.
I also didn't mention this, but Paige on our end is also managing the chat.
Yes.
She's here in the room with us.
Absolutely. So if you feel more comfortable putting something in the chat, by all means, we can see it that way as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and go into essential steps before you should buy. Alrighty, so some essential steps: researching cars that fit your student budget and lifestyle. So sometimes, you might have a good idea in mind of maybe a vehicle you're looking to possibly get, but we should also be considering some other things too. Of maybe you're looking to get your first apartment. What does that look like? What is the rent? What is the rent going to look like? Any groceries that you might need to supply, the fridge at your apartment. Is there any tuition if you're looking to go to college, get higher education? What's that going to look like? Even just your monthly subscriptions like that Netflix or the Hulu, or even maybe a monthly expense like you go to Starbucks every day, just sort of some finances that you have that are important to you that will be in combination with your auto payment. So considering multiple factors in addition to that auto payment, for your affordability. And your credit score, some of you might not have a credit score yet, and that's completely okay. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but your credit score, what does that look like? If you have a car now, no trade-in value. Every car does have a trade-in value. There is a website called Kelley Blue Book where you can insert the VIN to your car or your plate, and it'll just ask you a couple questions, and it'll provide you an estimation of the trade-in value for your car. So it can definitely be very helpful if you're looking to buy a new one. Just sort of know that trade-in value to put towards the new one. You can also do some research. So this is very important, comparing cars online and in person, because a lot of dealerships you'll find they will mark up that price to try and get that sale, but you can definitely do some research if you got a car in mind. It'd definitely be very helpful to research and kind of see what's out there and what fits best for you. And you can always get pre-approved for a loan before you shop. Again, just doing that research, having in mind your monthly budget, knowing your credit score. And we'll get into some resources later that can help when you're looking to actually apply for that loan. And the last step, of course, is shopping for that vehicle. Alrighty. Any questions so far? We doing okay? Awesome. All right, so we'll head into credit scores and reports. So what exactly is a credit score? A credit score is a number between 300 to 350, and it showcases your credit worthiness. So it's someone like the lender who takes it into account of how likely are you to repay the loan or make that payment each month. And it not just only for a car, but something like that apartment as well. And so what impacts that score? Well, paying your bills on time, making that monthly payment. Some providers often provide the opportunity for you to set it up on auto pay, to give you like a peace of mind to make that monthly payment, how much you owe, so how much you have available versus how much you've used, and keeping balances low for something like a credit card of, are you maxing out the card? Are you only keeping it below that 30%? In addition to how long have you had the credit? So how long has it been open? Have you had it a couple months? Have you had it maybe a couple of years? How many accounts do you have open? Do you have a few, or do you open up accounts pretty regularly? And then the number and types of accounts you have. So this can include not only auto loans, but something like a credit card as well. So kind of a mix of credit that you might have. And that credit report will showcase a little more into detail of not just what you have and how long you've had it, but how long have you been making payments? How much left do you owe on the loans? What types of accounts do you have to pay? How long have they been open? And every year you can request a free credit report online from each of the three major credit bureaus, which is really great to sort of help give you an idea of what the lender might be seeing when you're going to apply for a loan. So it can definitely be a very helpful tool, and it's completely free online as well. It can also help to catch any sort of mistakes or maybe sort of any discrepancies that you might see on your credit report that you're not quite familiar with. And so it's definitely a great tool that you can definitely utilize every year. Any questions about credit?
We did have quite a few at the last seminar, so please don't be shy. Jump in if you have questions. You have the expert here.
Absolutely. I know credit can be a little intimidating and can be kind of confusing, but please feel free to stop me either now or within the presentation if you have any questions. All right. And let's move on to determining your budget and affordability. So like we had talked about previously, you might have some other expenses that you take into account on your day-to-day life. And so you want to go ahead and add up your monthly income, such as how much you're making at your job. Is there any sort of income that you have coming in pretty regularly? Do you have any expenses? For the car, you not only have to factor in, of course, your monthly payment, but also some other additions like the gas, the insurance. If the car needed any repairs, what is that going to look like? In addition to, if you are looking to rent an apartment or a home, what does that look like in addition to your tuition fees, in addition to your vehicle payment, and seeing what's realistically left over so that you have some to put aside at the end of the month. And so you can do generally keeping your car costs, such as the payment, the insurance, gas, and maintenance, within 15 to 20% around of your monthly income. And you don't want to let that car payment take, you want to make sure that it's in combination with everything else, because you, of course, you might think that you have an idea of what vehicle you're looking to purchase now, but when you factor it in with all the other combinations, it might be a little out of your affordability when you combine it with your other expenses. And so you just want to make sure that you're making sure that you're keeping yourself in a good place, and so that it's not putting you over at the end of the month. Alrighty, and this is our activity to take home that Jamie was speaking about earlier. It's an expenses tracker and budget planner, and it's a really great way to outline your monthly expenses and sort of add up those things that are important to you, or those monthly expenses that you do have, such as the gas, the maintenance, the insurance for the vehicle, or anything like food, groceries, coffee, that Starbucks we had talked about earlier, any shopping expenses. It's a really great tool to sort of help you add that up and compare it to your monthly income to really see, well, how much am I really, are my expenses per month? How much am I spending per month? What does that look like in comparison to what I'm making? So we'll definitely be providing this to you. Please feel free to utilize it. It's a very great tool. Do you have any questions so far?
What
Please let
I'll,
me know if I'm going too quickly. Yeah.
what I'll add to this is just a very basic starter expense tracker and
Yeah.
budget planner. There are definitely apps and spreadsheets out there, some resources that we have that we're happy to share for things that we recommend, especially if you prefer to manage spreadsheets like this in a digital format. But this will be a follow-up that we send to you via digital PDF.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, this is a printable take-home one. You're more than welcome to use, but there are other options out there for your comfortability, such as Excel spreadsheets or applications more on a digital format that can also provide you with the same help when you're looking to compare your income versus the expenses. All right, so let's go ahead and do an activity. We're going to use the loan calculator here to calculate what a monthly payment would look like. So, Carlin, alrighty. Alrighty. So let's do some examples. Please let me know if there's any price ranges that you might be considering. I can definitely work those out for you. But this calculator is a great tool, especially when you're doing some research on your affordability of what a monthly payment would look like. For example, here we have a $20,000 car for an 84-month term at an interest rate of 9%, which results in a $296 payment. But what if we were to increase that a little bit and say 35,000 for 84 months at 8.5%. Now our monthly payment has gone up to 543. And so sometimes, as I had mentioned, you might be in a budget range of, oh, this vehicle, is on the upper level of the 30s to the 40s. In my position here, I definitely see a lot of younger auto buyers looking to buy the 60 grand newer truck or a 50,000 Mercedes Benz, which is great. They're definitely very, very nice cars, but we want to, of course, keep in mind the monthly payment because, of course, we want to be factoring in that interest rate, how long we're going to be financing it for, because the $543 might be within your means now, but if you're considering the housing, the groceries, each different vehicle make has its own cost when it comes to mechanical repairs. I know specifically for, I believe it's Mercedes, an oil change can range up to $400 per month. And so on top of the monthly payment, it might be a little out of affordability. And so you just want to keep in mind when you're looking, especially for newer vehicles, to make sure you're within your means there.
And Zoe will talk a little bit about this a little later in the presentation, but something I didn't know when I was a first-time car buyer was that these terms are negotiable. Not only is the interest rate based on your credit score, but the terms are negotiable, that down payment is negotiable, whether you have a trade-in vehicle or not is negotiable. So something to keep in mind, especially when you have tools like this at your disposal, to do the research ahead of time and go into the conversation, the negotiation, ready and understanding what some of those terms mean. It's a good step.
Absolutely, especially when you're speaking to a dealership. A lot of dealerships will not quite express the exact terms that they're looking to sign you up for. And so it's very important to do your research because even though a dealership might be presenting one interest rate, it's good to do some shopping around because dealerships in particular will sort of not quite, they'll keep adding it on. So I've seen instances in my role where I'll have a young auto buyer come to me, they've gone to a dealership and they said, well, I expressed this was my monthly payment to the dealership. I said $150. And they said, oh, okay, well, how about some Scotch guards for the seats? It only costs you $1,000. Now we're within $160. Well, that's within your budget. And so I said, okay. And well, they said that I needed the the fanciest mechanical repair coverage, it'll only cost an additional $20. Now we're at $170 per month. Well, that's still within your monthly payment, right? And so they will continue to add on continuously as if you don't do your research. And so it's very important, as we mentioned earlier, especially when it comes to the trade-in value of your vehicle, because that can be very important. In addition to a down payment can be very important and something you might want to be factoring in with your when you're considering your expenses versus your income to see maybe I do want to make a down payment, whether it be 500 or 1,000, because that can also impact that monthly payment as well. And so doing your research is definitely a very important step when it comes to auto buying. Perfect. So what does a reasonable car payment look like? Well, you want to keep the total car costs, including the loan itself, the insurance, extra expenses like gas and parking, around under 20% of your monthly income. And just like the online calculator tool that we used, there are plenty of calculators like that online that can help you sort of get an idea of, well, maybe I'm not looking for an 84-month term. Maybe I want to do a 60-month term. What would $10,000 look like over a 48-month term? What if I did 66 months, but I put $1,000 down payment? So it's definitely a great way to test those payments before you do decide to go through with purchasing a vehicle, because you want to make sure you still have some of those savings put aside to cover some emergencies, and so the payment itself isn't taking up your full monthly income. And so how you can do this is by thinking ahead, by thinking of the amount of hours you work, any sort of financial aid. Are you looking to have a housing change? Are you looking to rent, or do you still live at home? And it's better to drive something modest to avoid debt stress. As I mentioned before, I do see a lot of first-time auto buyers or a lot of younger auto buyers in my role who come to my team with stress because they've gone to a dealership, they found a bright, shiny new car that they really fell in love with, and they decided to go through the dealership. But the dealership started tacking on all those fees, and they come to me and say, how do I get out of this? I'm at a 20% interest rate, for a brand new car, because the truth is, the minute you drive the car off the lot, it immediately depreciates in value. And so that's something to keep in mind, and especially for a first-time auto buyer, used might be the preferred way to go. Do I have any questions so far? All right, perfect. And avoiding negative equity. So this is something in particular that is very important, especially if you're looking at dealerships, and doing your research is very important, because negative equity is owing more than what the car is worth. And this is something that can be very common. It can be a very big trap, especially for students, because just like I had mentioned earlier, sometimes a lot of those dealerships will mark up the price so that they can make that sale. And some common traps can also include putting no money down, so maybe not having some funds set aside for a down payment, long-term loans with small payments, or paying more than the car's value at a sketchy lot or some dealerships. But this can be avoided, of course, not only by doing research, but by saving for a down payment. And that could include setting aside $5 for a paycheck, $10 per paycheck. Just that shortly adds up over a period of time, so that you do have some set aside to put for that down payment, and then keeping the loan term short. Because the shorter the term, the less interest you're going to be paying over time. And so if you have a longer term, say like the 84 months, you're going to be paying a little bit more interest than you would, say, for 60 months. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind when you're looking for a vehicle. And also getting upsold on those extras that you don't need, as I mentioned earlier, of the, we'll provide the tint on the windows, we'll put the Scotch Guard on your seats, we'll buff up those rims for you, make them gold, adding on those extras to increase the price and sort of further put you into that negative equity where they're adding on a lot of unnecessary additional add-ons that you don't need, and now it's not only increasing your payment, but it's putting you in some negative equity because now you're paying a little bit more than what the vehicle was actually worth. And then you can also pay a little extra each month you can, which is great. This includes making bi-weekly payments. So instead of making the one payment monthly, you can maybe split it up to where you're making a payment every other month. And so it puts you a little, or every other week, bi-weekly. And so you're making a little bit extra, or even if you are more comfortable with those monthly payments, say the payment is $345, maybe you pay $350. And so just paying a little bit extra a month is definitely a great way to sort of help you not only pay down the loan, but pay on any sort of interest that's accrued on the loan itself. Awesome. We doing all right so far? Any sort of questions? Anything you want me to clarify? Perfect. All right. All right, so let's go over some pros and cons of new, pre-owned, and leased vehicles. So some pros and cons, a new car. You got that new car smell. No one's ever driven it but you. It's brand new. Sometimes there's some special financing offers. I know some dealerships will have a promotion of 0% interest for 3 months. It's less likely to break down because it's brand new. No one's ever driven it but you. It comes with that dealership warranty. How about some cons? Big price tag. A new car always results in a higher price, which means the loan amount will be bigger. It depreciates fast, as we had mentioned. The minute you drive it off the lot, it will depreciate in value. And insurance cost is often higher. I will say, when you're doing your research, you can go online and any insurance agency, such as the Geico's, the Progressive, you can go online, provide a little bit of your information, and you can get a free quote. And so before you even look to purchase the car, when you're doing some research, you can get a free quote of what that insurance payment might look like, so you can factor that in with your monthly expenses. And pre-owned. Pre-owned definitely might be the best way to go for a first-time auto buyer, especially because the lower price means a smaller or no loan at all. That also includes lower insurance costs, slower depreciation, and certified pre-owned can often include a warranty at times. It does not often come with a warranty sometimes, or it might be past that warranty. There can be limited tech features sometimes, and it may need some repairs since there have been some previous owners that have driven the vehicle. However, although someone may have driven it before, you can always request the Carfax history. You can always request to see what repairs have been done, any insurance claims that might have been reported for the vehicle, any sort of modifications that may have been done. It's all reported, so that comes in handy when you're doing your research, because you may be looking at a vehicle and then you can request the Carfax and see everything that's been done for that car, and so you have a better idea of the shape that car might be in. So it's definitely a great tool that can be utilized when you're doing your research. For leased vehicles I don't quite recommend for a first-time auto buyer. Leased vehicles are, you lease the vehicle for a couple of months. So it can be good for someone who's maybe trying to get a feel, for the type of car that might best suit them. So they lease it for a couple of months, just as you would lease an apartment. And it can result in lower monthly payments than buying the car. You can, of course, test out a newer car and may come with a warranty. However, since you're leasing the vehicle, the payments you make, you're not purchasing, you don't own it. And a lot of leased contracts often come with strict mileage limits. There are fees associated for any wear and tear, and then the cost can certainly add up if you release the vehicle multiple times. In addition, when it comes to a leased vehicle, when you're first leasing it and you're signing the contract, there are, of course, those fees associated with it. But at the end, say that you love the car, you think it's the car for you, so you're looking to purchase it. You now have to repay all those initial fees again that you initially paid when you first lease the vehicle. So it can definitely be a very great option. However, for a first-time auto buyer, I would recommend looking sort of around that pre-owned sort of selection. Alrighty, so what can we do to negotiate? We've done some research and now we might have an idea of the type of car we're looking to get. Negotiation certainly comes in handy when it comes to dealerships. So the first step is always research, 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 because researching car prices online before going to the law is crucial because we do see those dealerships sometimes mark up that price way over value. And you can always apply to get pre-approved for financing to show that you really do want to go through with purchasing a vehicle and that you have an idea of what you're looking for. And in addition to your research, setting your budget and deciding this is the best budget for me, this is the range I'm looking for that comfortably I can pay in addition to my other expenses alongside being able to save some on the side. And be ready to walk away when the dealership is looking to tack on those add-ons, or maybe they're not willing to, they're trying to get you to stretch that budget a little bit because they think that you can afford more than what you had determined. And so be ready to walk away and say, I'm not comfortable with that. And negotiate the total price because more often than not, it can be negotiated. It's not a set price that they're willing to not budge on. It's definitely very important to, when you come in handy and do that research and say, hey, this is, upon my research, this is what I found out. You know, I see that you have it listed at this price, but you know, can we talk about that a little more? And don't rush. I know it might be, and you know, you're excited, you know, get the first vehicle. I just recently got my first car. I was a first time auto buyer at 23. And so I definitely understand the excitement looking at the new car. My first car I'd ever purchased was a Ford Mustang. And I was so excited to get that sports car when I was younger, very excited, but I made sure to do my research and not rush because when you rush through it, then the other crucial steps you might not be considering. Like you might, when you're rushing and you're just looking for the vehicle, when you have a set, I'm looking for this vehicle, I will purchase at any price, then you run into the negative equity, or you might be out of your budget, and now your loan terms might be a little different because you need to request a larger amount. And so not rushing and doing your research and making sure you're setting yourself up for success is definitely very important. And always get the details in writing. This is something very important when it comes to a dealership, especially when they're trying to stretch your budget or add those additional add-ons, because they might say one thing to you, but if it's not written down, that's another thing. And so it's very important to make sure that you understand exactly what the terms are so that there's no confusion around your monthly payment, what things are going to cost, you know, how much the car is going to cost, what's going to be add on to the vehicle. And so that's where coming in handy of doing your research is very important.
The one thing I'll add to this is do not be afraid to ask questions in these negotiations. Car buyers will, or car sellers will sometimes make you feel pressured to sign on the dotted line before you get any and all of your questions answered. But slowing the conversation down, getting your questions answered will definitely make you feel like the experience was also a success after you do sign on that dotted line. So please don't be afraid to ask questions throughout the negotiation.
Absolutely. It's definitely very important to ask, especially if you're at a dealership, the questions, because sometimes they will try to put you in a rush make you anxious, make you stressed because they want to rush you because they're looking to make the sale. But it's okay to take a step back and say, hey, please explain this to me. I want to make sure, this is the exact terms, this is the exact car I'm going to be buying. Could you explain this to me in more detail? It's certainly okay to definitely ask questions because sometimes they will try to rush you so that you don't ask any questions. And so it's definitely very important to not rush it, do your research, and it's okay to take a step back and take a little more time. Alrighty. So when it comes to financing, maybe you've done some research, you put your budget into a little bit better perspective, and now you've got a good idea and you're looking for some financing. And so I will say, not just because I work here at a credit union, but credit unions will often provide better rates for students because credit unions are not for profit. Banks in particular will often present higher interest rates because banks are for profit. I previously came from a bank, and I can say that the interest rates there were about double than what they were currently we have here at the credit union. And so I will always present the idea that a credit union will often provide a better rate at the end of the day in comparison to a bank. And you can always go through the dealership as well. It can be convenient. You're sitting right there. The dealer provides you with all the papers, the documentation, and said, we can have you drive away with this car, right here. No ifs, ands, or buts. But however, dealership financing, although it can be convenient and you can drive away with the vehicle oftentimes same day, that interest rates do result often being a little bit higher. I have seen interest rates about as high as 20% when it comes to dealership financing. And so dealerships can be convenient. However, you also want to factor in, well, my interest rate's going to be higher. What does that look like for the amount I'm financing? And what does that look like for my monthly payment? And there are online lenders such as nowadays we live in the age of the digital everything. And so there are online lenders. The biggest one I see is normally Carvana, and it can be fast. You can enter your details online, just ask a few questions. You can see the car digitally through pictures, and although that can also be convenient, you just want to be careful, and this is where your research also comes in handy for any reviews, and you really want to be careful of scams. And a great option I do recommend for first-time auto buying is a cosigner, especially if you're looking to build up your credit or maybe you don't have any credit yet. That's completely okay. A cosigner, what does that look like? That can be a parent or a guardian, and it's definitely a great way to help you take your first steps into that first-time auto buying journey. I see it all the time, and it's a great option, and I highly recommend it for any young first-time auto buyer. And when it comes to finance charges, what does that sort of look like and what does that mean? And so there are a couple different types, such as a simple interest loan, which can be the best option where you only pay interest on what's left of the loan balance. There's also add-on interest loans, which can be more expensive. And then laws limit how high rates can go. That's why I'll always recommend a credit union, because there are regulations on the interest rates that we provide to our members. That includes the Truth in Lending Act, because it requires our lenders to show the real annual percentage rate. And so there's no confusion on the terms that you'll have with us. And so it's definitely a very great option. I will always recommend, as I said, a cosigner is definitely a great opportunity to help you build up sort of that credit that we had spoke about earlier. Are there any questions about credit unions, lending, having a cosigner? No?
We have a question in the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
How long does a cosigner, their names, or I don't know, how long do they last on the loan? When does the cosigner draw?
To clarify, how long is the cosigner on the loan with you?
Correct.
Yeah, so when you go to apply for that loan, say you apply for a 60-month term for a vehicle and you apply with a cosigner, the cosigner will be on that loan with you for the entirety of the term. Unless you decide later down the line you look to refinance it maybe with another institution or something like that. But say you were to apply with us for a 60-month term, you apply with a family member, that family member will be on that loan with you for those 60 months. And so it will be for the entirety of that loan term.
Good question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to expand a little bit on what Zoe mentioned, refinancing vehicles is also very common. So if you wanted to start out your car loan with a cosigner and a couple of years in, you have a better credit score, maybe you're working on it in other ways, and you want to refinance for either a lower interest rate or to remove that cosigner, that is always an option to you. We advocate for the same stuff when you refinance. If that's something that you're looking to do, ask questions, determine what that term is. That way you fully understand what changes and how that can impact your long-term credit. But great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely wonderful question. Cosigners are definitely a great opportunity to help you build on that credit. And as Jamie mentioned earlier, we commonly see refinances because say maybe you found the car that's for you and you decided to go to the dealership. Down the line, you've built up that credit. You've got a good history of making those payments, but maybe you're looking to get that payment a little bit lower. Now that you've got some experience with that loan, now you can apply to refinance, and now those terms may look a little different for you now that you've got some experience and you've built on that credit. Now you might qualify for a lower interest rate and a lower payment than what you're currently paying for the dealership. And so refinancing is definitely a great opportunity as well when you're building up on that experience of when you have that loan. Alrighty, and reviewing the contract, this is very important alongside your research and reviewing that contract. And the biggest thing I can say is do not rush, especially when you're at the dealership and they present the documents in front of you and they're saying sign here, here, and here. Do not rush. It's okay to take the time to read through each document because it's very important that you look for the purchase price and the fees, any sort of trade-in details. That's when it comes in handy to do the research of maybe the car you have now, what sort of trade-in value does that look like? The financing terms, so what exactly is the rate, the monthly payment, and then the length, how long you're going to be financing the car for. Was there any sort of extras added to the deal? Dealerships will try to put those fees in there without telling you. As I mentioned earlier, they will try to put on those extra add-ons that they think you might need, but you really don't need. And so it's really important to watch out for any of those extras because sometimes they will put that in there, but they will kind of gloss over it because they're trying to make that sale. So it's very important to look out for that. Is there any sort of warranty coverage on the vehicle still? Insurance requirements, what does that look like? And then do you have the right to cancel? There are some dealerships who do provide the option of canceling the contract, say within 24 hours. Some provide you maybe a few days. It's very important to read over those fine details just in case. And so this is where being patient and doing your research really comes in handy. All right, things to know about insurance. It's required. And as I mentioned earlier, you can go online to almost every major insurance company that provides vehicle coverage, and you can get a free quote to see what the vehicle coverage would look like for that insurance company and types of insurance, types of things that pertaining to insurance I think students should know. Of course, is the liability that's always going to be required in addition to collision, especially when we're looking to finance. Liability and collision are going to be very important because it is required for the loan and of course covers the damage to your car if you were to get in an accident. Comprehensive will also be required as well, and it covers things like theft, fire, sort of scenarios like that, in addition to personal injury protection, such as medical payments. And then an unfortunate common scenario we see here in New Mexico is the underinsured motorist that protects if the other driver has no coverage. And then gap insurance, gap can be very beneficial, especially for a first-time auto buyer, and it covers the difference if your car is totaled but the loan isn't paid off. I will advocate for gap all the time. My team is a very big advocate for gap because it can be very helpful, especially when it comes to saving you money. Say your car is worth 15,000, but you owe 18,000, and then you get in an accident. Well, Gap's going to cover that difference because the insurance is only going to pay that 15. So now that 3,000 out of pocket, Gap will cover for you as opposed to that coming out of your savings. And so it can definitely be very beneficial on the chance that something were to happen to you or the vehicle. And so it's a very great tool, very great addition that you can have added to the loan itself that can really help save in those times of need like that.
The one thing I'll add to this discussion of insurance is I also highly advocate for starting a good relationship with your insurance agent, because having an open conversation with your insurance agent about the cost of different types of insurance can definitely help you when you're doing your research ahead of buying your vehicle. I can definitely say my insurance agent is on my Christmas card list because she has helped me out of some pretty difficult spots in the past. And she is on my speed dial when I go to buy a new vehicle, because the insurance can look different based on the vehicle that you're looking to purchase. So knowing if things are going to stay in my monthly budget will also depend on what that insurance cost for that very specific car is. So highly recommend starting a relationship and growing a relationship with a trusted insurance agent.
Absolutely. It's definitely very important. That also comes into the research of insurance does not cost the same for every car out there. So sort of doing that research and looking for what does fit my monthly budget and getting those free online quotes to see, well, does that really look affordable to me? Or maybe I should continue my research. And so that's definitely a very important tool. And there's also opportunities to lower your insurance costs. I can certainly attest to the student good grades discount. This is something I did have when I was a student in high school up until early college. A lot of insurance companies will often just ask for, say, like a report card or a semester at the end of the year final grades. And depending on the grades, they might offer a discount, on your monthly insurance, in addition to keeping your credit healthy, making those on-time payments, showing the lender that you're reliable when it comes to that loan, and you got good history with the vehicle, and driving safely is a very important one. We see a lot of increase when it comes to vehicle collisions. And when it comes to a lot of accidents, it seems like it's been a very predominant thing we've been seeing as of recently. That's why I will always be an advocate for gap insurance, but we always want to make sure that we're driving safely, because those accidents do get reported to the insurance agencies, and so they do keep that in mind when it comes to the coverage. And then only buying extra coverage that you really need, sort of kind of like when you're doing the research for the vehicle, is there any sort of additional add-ons that may be a little unnecessary, when it comes to my coverage? All right. And then when it comes to your resources, we live in the digital age where research can be done primarily online, but of course there's also opportunity to go in person to speak to somebody if you have any sort of questions like that. And so what does that look like? Credit union staff, any trusted family members or mentors, and then those online tools and calculators. There's lots of opportunity to, help you when it comes to making those decisions, because first time auto buying is a very big decision and it can be very intimidating because there's so many options out there. So really doing your research and being patient, or asking a trusted family member for any sort of help like that. And an example for online, of course, with those tools, we had used earlier the auto calculator to calculate payments. What does a down payment look like? What would it, this term for this interest rate look like? Can definitely be very helpful. Comparing new and used cars is definitely very important, because that's a drastic change, not only for your monthly payment, but for your interest, for your insurance too. So it's definitely very important to keep that in mind. And then those annual credit reports, where yearly you can request a free report from the 3 credit bureaus. Do a review of your credit. How is it looking? How have you been building on it since you began your credit journey? And of course, here at San Diego area, we're more than happy to help you. Myself and my team are always more than happy to help first-time auto buyers when it comes to that financial journey, as well as in our branch locations. And so we're always more than happy to help you. But is there any sort of questions or anything you'd like me to clarify?
I think that's our last slide, but go ahead and tap
I
over
think
to
so.
the next one.
Perfect. Yeah. Any wrap-up questions, anything like that? But just to review, don't buy more car than you can afford. So just keeping in mind your monthly budget, your expenses. Used cars often make the most sense in college. Sometimes the newest, right off the factory car might seem like the best. But sometimes when you really put things into perspective, that you do the research, you don't rush, sometimes that might not be the best option for you. And then we, of course, want to protect ourselves from debt traps like the negative equity, the long loans, or any sort of dealerships that are, aren't quite clear when it comes to the terms, or putting some add-ons onto the terms. And then doing the research, shopping around, and then always keeping in mind that this car is a step in your financial journey. It's not a final destination. And so taking the time to step back and really making sure that you're setting yourself up for success is important, because at the end of the day, it's just a step, and this isn't the end of the road. And so you can always take the time to, set yourself up. And so,
We do have a question in the chat.
yeah.
The question is, does the dealership give you documentation of everything that you're paying for?
That's where going through the contract is very important, because sometimes dealerships might not include something in writing, or sometimes you might have had a conversation earlier with the dealer where they said, hey, I'll take X amount of dollars off the car if you drive it off the lot today. But when you go to sign the paperwork, it might not notate that. And so that's where taking the time to go through the contract that they provide you, make sure everything looks okay, because sometimes they won't include everything on there.
But I think just to add on to that, Zoe,
Yeah.
that if you did discuss something and it was part of the negotiation, you always want to make sure to get it in writing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Great question.
All right. Well, we appreciate everyone's time. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We have about 7 minutes left. So I'll leave one last invitation for questions on the table before we excuse ourselves. Anything in the chat? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody. We will see you on April 14th in person. We're very excited. Paige and I will be there in person talking about credit reports, credit history, all the good credit discussions. So please sign up for that April 14th presentation, and we'll see you in person soon. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.